iPhone 11 boot loop. So this is also in conjunction with no cellular service. It's pretty obvious after it boot loops about 3 or 4 times, we'll get to see that it actually comes on momentarily, and then we'll get the cellular update failure. So let's go ahead and dive into this one. This one has a lot of issues, but I see the housing is a little bent. So anytime you've got a hard drop, a bend in the housing, that can cause sandwich separation. So let's go ahead and get this separated, and let's see if this is fixable. So essential tools to diagnose this issue is to have sandwich jigs. So I've got 12 series, X series, 11 series. Essentially what we're going to do to isolate the problem and to confirm we have a good known connection between the both layers of the motherboard is that we're going to go ahead and put it inside of this jig, and then we're going to go ahead and put the spacer. So the spacer essentially says, hey, to verify that we have a good connection, let's force a connection, a good known connection between the top board and bottom board. So it has these little pegs. With these pegs, essentially, it's just going to make a confirmed connection. So if we just kind of look at the outer perimeter, you will see some empty spots by default, but you will also see that it's going to have all of your RF connections. It's going to have your I2C connections. It's going to have your VDD main power rail connections, so on and so forth. So as long as we can go ahead and separate it, get a clean split, and then go ahead and put it in the sandwich jig, we are able to test it. So we've got the board out, and I'm just going to do a quick visual inspection, making sure we don't have any water damage, because this could be either 2 issues. I believe it could be sandwich layer related, which we may see broken pads when we split this, or it can be a candidate for bottom board swap. If it's water damage, I don't do bottom board swap if it's water damage. Water damage is for data recovery only. All right, so let's go ahead and put this in the preheater. I don't see anything that stands out at the moment, but let's go ahead and separate this. So the preheater we're going to be using today is going to be the Mijing CH5. This is my favorite preheater for low temperature boards. I don't recommend this for high temperature boards. It just takes too long. So essentially what we do is we're going to set it to 180 Celsius on the preheater, and then we're going to go ahead and line this up. We do have certain locations where we can keep the board propped in place, so to speak, and then we'll go ahead and separate this and take a look at the layers and see what we have. All right, so we have this on the preheater at 120 Celsius. I like to start off at 120 because I'm going to run a little bit of alcohol on top of these little gummy pads that go around the FPC connector. So we'll take these off because if you don't remove them, of course, if you see my previous video, I explained that these things will kind of melt on you. So we will go ahead and just remove all of them. We will raise the temperature to 180 Celsius. So I think we got a few more. We got some on this side around the charge port FPC, battery terminal. So with a little bit of heat, a little bit of alcohol, it's really easy to come off. So always remove this first, and you won't have to deal with your components looking like they're shrink wrapped. There is also, like, sometimes on the bottom, if you don't get it all the way, there's a little piece of plastic, which I think is like with the side that has adhesive, but you want to remove that as well, because it will shrink and then just cause issues. And if it doesn't cause issues, it'll actually just become so burnt that it's just hard to reconnect your flex cables back into the connectors. All right, so we will go ahead and raise the temperature on this to 180, and we are set to 180 Celsius. I usually like to do 180, 185. It just depends. If it's something that I have to redo, or if it's something that it's a private repair, I'd probably try at a lower temperature. We'll let this get the temperature. Right now we're climbing at 144, 145 Celsius. All right, so another trick that I like to do to be sure, since this board uses like a lower melting temperature in between the boards, in between the two halves. If you're having an issue with timing, what you could essentially do is just fold back the NAND, the paper that's on the NAND, grab a piece or a little bit of low melt, the form of a paste. So we can go ahead and just add a little bit on the top of the NAND, just a little amount. That should be good enough right there. Once that starts to melt, essentially it's basically an indicator to let you know, like, hey, it's time to separate the board. So I like to add a little flux on that area, and then once you see the balls starting to form, they may look like little solder balls. Sometimes it comes together like as a clump of solder. That's going to give me an indication. So we are at 179, and I'm going to go ahead and try to see. I see a little bit of the solder, like solder balls, little small solder balls. So we can go ahead, if this is, so the theory is if this low melt on top of the NAND is melting, then our board should be ready. Let me put these little pegs back on to make sure that when we lift the board, we won't have any issues. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start from one corner, because I already see that the solder is melting from the paste. And once I lift up once, I just grab with my hand. So I'll pick up and I'll set this over here. We will remove the bottom board, and then we can go ahead and start to do a visual inspection. So let's take a look at the bottom side of the board. Just like I said, some pads. So we definitely have some rip pads. I've done this enough times to kind of just guess it and be right at least 95% of the time. Anytime you're dealing with issues with no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, searching no service, cellular update failed message, then we're going to be dealing with a couple pads. So we have a couple pads that are, so the way that I know that these pads are broken, besides just seeing the brown, is that if you look at the opposite side of the board, if you kind of line up where those pads are supposed to go, we will see broken pads. So the broken pads are essentially, well, I'm going to zoom in so you can really see it. I can make it look better if I clean it up. I'm going to just run some alcohol in this general area, and the brown pads with the 3 dots in the middle is a severed connection or broken connection. So we have a broken connection in several places. So what we're going to do today is we're going to use some Wiley solder lugs, and we're going to rejoin that connection. Now, in most cases, not every single connection is going to be an important connection. You may have a connection that's ground, that's not needed, or anything like that. As we continue to look all around the perimeter, we're going to notice we just have to keep track of which pads are important and how many pads are broken. All right, guys, let's take a look at which pads are important and which ones are irrelevant. We have ZXW open, and we're going to look at this general area. So let's zoom out to get some context, and let's go ahead and start around the coil. So we look south of that coil. We've got a couple connections here, and we would just go ahead and verify with our multimeter. We are currently in diode mode, so I would like to get a voltage drop reading, and I believe this is ground. This is ground. The next connection should be AMUX_PMU. So I know for a fact this is important. Yep, I'm getting a reading. That's important, and then we should have ground. So just again, if I'm not being specific, we tested these 2 pads first, the ones that are ripped on the board, and then the third connection to the left is going to be ground, so we use that as a reference point. So we can go back and we can get a voltage drop reading here, 581, 582. That's what my meter is giving me. The ZXW is going to be slightly off or slightly different. We have ground, and then this is a connection as well. So we're gonna, yep, it's 3. I'm getting 325. It's 295 on ZXW, but that's fine. That's within, it's close enough. So let's test that one more time. Yeah, 325 and then 295 on ZXW. Let's go further down now. We're gonna move a little bit more towards the right, and I like to use capacitors and ICs as a reference point. So let's go ahead and move close to U4700, and we have 2 capacitors and a resistor. That's going to kind of get us in line with our target area that we need to take a look at. And yep, that's important. So we're getting 714 on our meter and 698 in ZXW. So we're definitely going to restore this pad. This pad is, that's ground, and then so yeah, that pad is going to be rear mic 2 that works with the rear camera system. I can tell you I don't know exactly what every single line does, but you get an indication. If you see an acronym or an abbreviation, it reminds you of something, or you're usually right. So if you read, let's see, let's look at an example of a line that I have no idea what it does, right? Let's just guess. Let's just guess. This line here, just because it has RF in it, I know it's going to go to some kind of radio frequency chip. So that has to do probably with baseband, right? So I guess I'm more than likely right. It was just good to know as much as you can about you know, these abbreviations and these acronyms. So like for instance, PP2V63 NAND, we know that goes to NAND. And what is the V? The V to me is point. So that's 2.63 volts that it's going to be sent to NAND. So, so yeah, because I get asked a lot what goes to what. I mean, I don't know exactly. I would say about a core 85% of everything on a motherboard, I can tell you exactly where it goes. But some things that I have a circuit that I've never had to touch before, or just very, very common, and it won't fail, or it's not likely to fail. I can kind of zoom in, you can click into ZXW, and you can kind of get a gist of where things are going. Yeah, we have 2 broken pads, and yep, just to verify, yeah, that's an important connection. So we're gonna rejoin this connection and get everything restored. So let me grab my Wiley solder lugs, and then let's get to work. So this is the Wiley solder lugs. We are going to be stealing a few more solder lugs from this, and then we're going to transfer this over and install it onto the broken pads. so there's a couple things that we need. We need our jig. We're going to start with putting our bottom board in here. I'm going to line up this for the 11 series, I believe it's this way. So we got the bottom in there. It's situated by these posts. And then we're going to put in our spacer. It's really easy to figure out which way the spacer goes in. Essentially, if you put it in where the spaces, the empty holes on the top, you just line it up. There's two on this side and one on this side. Yeah, so with these two holes right here, it goes on this side. A couple things I like to actually connect before I go ahead and put the top part on is the power button flex. So that's gonna help me if I need to go ahead and get this connected into recovery mode. What I like to do is just hold the power button down, and when you boot the phone up, as long as there's a presence of the power button being pressed continuously, it'll go into recovery mode. So within recovery mode, we are going to be able to update the phone, flash it, do whatever we need via software on the software end. So let's go ahead and get this connected. We do have our power button, and I'll push this out to the side so we can still click the power button and when we need it. And then we're just gonna situate this way. So you can kind of shimmy it around to make sure you have a good connection. Well, it's aligned and everything is, for the most part, just lined up. And as you see that middle spacer, those little teeth are kind of grinding into the appropriate connections that we need to make this phone boot and work and test. Plug this up. Let's get this, make sure this is 100% aligned. Yes, it is. There we go. So we still have access to our power button here on the side. And now we're just gonna connect our charge port. I don't like doing any of this type of work off DC power supply because you tend to have issues with boot looping and a whole bunch of issues. So there's always battery powered is the preferred method. So we are going to just simply get this connected here. We're going to connect our screen. Our screen is about to be connected now. We don't really need the Face ID to be plugged in, but I'm going to go grab a battery. I'll be right back. We have our battery, and we'll go ahead and get this connected. Use something to prop this battery up, making sure it's not going to disconnect. And we can try to prompt the boot with the lightning cable. And this charge port is a little bit flimsy, so I like to hold it while prompting it to boot. So push that in, lean this over really slow, and we've got an Apple logo. Now, what we're just trying to see now is if the device is still going to boot loop continuously, or if we're able to get to the home screen and test a couple of things out. Just waiting for it to boot up. All right, so don't worry about the Face ID message. We actually just don't have that connected. So it looks like the phone's no longer rebooting. I'm getting this battery message, because it's not the original battery. I use my own good known batteries for testing. I don't use a customer's battery. In some cases I do, in other cases I don't. So Wi-Fi is back. Wi-Fi was completely grayed out. The good news is it actually says no SIM. So no SIM represents that we may not have an issue. I don't want to confidently say just because it says no SIM that baseband is fixed. I've had issues where I've had a SIM card in there and it'll pick up service, but you can't make outbound calls after the repair. Or I had issues where it'll say no SIM, and then you place a SIM inside and it won't do SIM detect. It won't detect the SIM. So let's do *#06#, which is a shortcut for seeing if pretty much if we can send a message or a signal to baseband CPU to respond with the IMEI and all the information. So *#06#. Yep, there we go. So all of the device IMEI information is now back. So basically what I'm going to be doing is, I was going to reball for this video, but I've got a ton of work on my bench. Honestly, you guys seen the reballs on my first video, the 12 Pro Max, how to prep a 12 Pro Max. It's the same process. We pretty much reball it, we sit it back down, and then the phone is fully functional. no issues. I did have an issue prior. The power button did not work. So before I did the video, it boot looped like 5 or 10 times, and then I was able to get it on for maybe 45 seconds to be able to, get those messages like the cellular update failure, and I was able to notice that the Wi-Fi was missing. But I noticed that the power button and the power button and the volume up and down button wasn't like responding. So I'm going to see if I can just shift this phone just a little bit without disconnecting anything, or leaning this forward and then clicking on the power button and seeing if I can get it to respond in any way. So just to make sure, this is a good moment to test for everything. We have it in a test jig, and we don't have to, let me prop this up like this a little bit. I can see from the backlight if it's working. So just based off the backlight, if I hit the button, yep, I can see it. I know you guys can see it from there. I'll try to lean it just a little bit so you guys can see it. But yeah, the power button's responding now. There it goes. So that issue went away. So yeah, anytime you have severed connections that are missing or broken, and you need to restore a bunch of pads, the phone is not going to act. It's not going to function properly, not in a normal sense. So let's see if we can connect to Wi-Fi networks. That's something else we want to test real quick. It's going to take us to the iCloud screen. I don't want you to see the customer's information. Let's see if we can just connect to my network. There it goes. It's picking up SSIDs. So off camera, I'll enter in my passcode and I'll test everything else. But now we're able to see 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz networks. So that's good news. So there you go, iPhone 11 with a couple of broken pads that we were able to restore, and now the phone is fully functional. This could happen within 10 series, 11 series, 12 series, 13 series, all the way up to the 14. It's a very common issue. Anytime there's a hard drop, separation, a bend in the housing, that can cause enough stress for many issues to occur, such as no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, no service, boot looping, no charging. I've seen tons of issues. So if you're having an issue like this and you need it repaired, we do offer B2B mail-in service with a pretty fast turnaround. If you guys need any references, we can go ahead and send you that as well, as we do work for many other companies. So I will see you guys next week with another awesome video. Thanks for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Take care, guys. I see you later.